This narrative is on the first part of torts or civil law. The definition of torts is a wrong that involves a breach of civil duty other than a contractual duty owed to someone else. It is differentiated from a crime, which involves a breach of duty owed to society in general. It may also be defined as a personal injury or as a civil action rather than or other than a breach of contract. There are several types of torts that you will note on the slide: intentional torts, property torts, and negligence. Those are the three types. Following these are three other types of torts: liability, nuisance, and dignitary torts. You will notice among these 6 types that have now been mentioned some items that can be attached to education. The next slide talks to 3 other types of torts: economic, and we certainly have seen a great deal of economics torts lately in the news; common law areas, and defenses that are used to combat torts. Under liability, there's what's called the last clear chance or eggshell skull rule. It's a legal doctrine that says that the wrongdoer takes the victim in the condition that he or she finds them. If a defendant negligently injures someone, the defendant is responsible for all of the consequences, whether they are foreseeable or not. And vicarious liability refers to liability for the negligent or criminal acts of another person that is assigned to someone else by law. Vicarious liability exists when liability is attributed to a person who has control over or responsibility for another who negligently causes an injury or otherwise would be liable. Whenever an agency relationship exists, the principal, the person responsible, is responsible for the agent's actions. And then you'll notice a few other definitional topics under type of torts. Next, we talk about the elements of negligence. This comes out of a case called Lubitz versus Wells from 1947. You'll notice that within this case, where James Wells Sr. left a golf club lying in the backyard of his home, and his 11-year-old son, James, swung it at a stone with his 9-year-old playmate nearby and hit the other child's jaw and chin, causing injury. You'll notice the procedural history, and in a case brief, the issue, the holding, the rule, and the reasoning, speaking to the elements of negligence. The next term that you should become familiar with is demurrer sustained, which was a method of objecting that admits the facts of the opponent's argument but denies that they were sustainable in the pleading based upon them. And you'll take a look at this and see that in most cases this doesn't exist any longer. The legal standard to prove negligence comprises of 4 elements: duty of care, dereliction or breach of that duty, the suffered damage, and that the damage was not too remote, there was proximate cause. In the standards of care, you'll notice the case brief on Robinson v. Lindsay from 1979. And what this case was where a 13-year-old was driving a snowmobile that was the property of the co-defendant. He was pulling an 11-year-old behind on an inner tube attached to the snowmobile by a rope. Unfortunately, the plaintiff's thumb became entangled in the rope and was severed. The doctors reattached it, but the plaintiff did not regain full use. So the standard here, or the issue, became: should a child be held to the adult standard of care regarding negligence when engaging in an inherently dangerous activity? And you see on the next screen that the court ruled yes. The 13-year-old who drives a snowmobile is engaging in an inherently dangerous adult activity and must be held to the adult standard of care. You'll notice the reasoning on Robinson v. Lindsay and the proximate cause. Under proximate cause, the question became, can a defendant whose negligence caused an accident where the plaintiff suffered minor physical damages be liable for the aggravation of a pre-existing illness attributed to that accident? And you'll see the holding, rule, reasoning, and the judgment from the Supreme Court of the State of New York on the youngster's claim. The last major slide in this series is on statutory torts, where these impose duties on private or public parties. They are created by the legislature, not the courts. These have a great deal to do with consumer protection and business, that makes defective products that harm people, and that they should be held responsible for any damage that results. In the next series of slides, in the part 2, which is in Module 4, we'll talk about nuisance and public nuisance, intentional torts, and economic torts.